Dr. Kenneth Jernigan was the outstanding blind leader of the blind in the 20th century, and I was very fortunate that he was my mentor. So I know lots of people and lots of stories about him and how he interacted with so many people so well. There are two articles by two of his sighted friends about flying that Jenny is going to read for us now.
Of Friendship and Flying by Larry McKeever. I first met Kenneth Jernigan in the mid-1960s. I had been reading for the Iowa Library for some years, and when I returned from Australia, I began working at a classical music station in Des Moines. Shortly after that, Dr. Jernigan called and wondered if this offbeat station would be interested in a program of poetry. Our friendship began with the production of those programs. I was immediately impressed with his knowledge, not only of poetry, but of people and the world. His dedication to the Federation was apparent from the beginning. Later that year, Jim Valiant, Dr. Jernigan's administrative assistant at the Iowa Commission for the Blind, resigned to return to Maryland. Dr. Jernigan and I discussed the possibility of my assuming that position. After an intense interview and testing, I was hired and attended my first NFB convention in Washington. We eventually decided that this was not the right position for me, so I assumed another job at the commission. Mary Ellen Anderson, now Jernigan, joined the staff at that time. That was the beginning of my friendship with both of these remarkable people, a friendship which has lasted to this day. Early in 1968, I started a recording studio. Not too long after that, Dr. Jernigan called saying that the person who had been recording the conventions was retiring. He wondered if I was interested in that job, as well as recording and producing the Braille Monitor. I began reading the Monitor and working closely with Dr. Jernigan, who usually read the articles he had written. My last Braille Monitor and convention recording were done at the studio at the new NFB headquarters opened in 1988. I remember the discussion about the difficult situation in Iowa in 1978, whether to stay and fight the naysayers or move the NFB offices. When Dr. Jernigan decided to go to Baltimore, I was saddened, but I agreed with the decision. I also remember the first time I went to Baltimore. The NFB occupied a smallish office on St. Paul Street with boxes and furniture everywhere. What a difference between that and a tiny service and magnificent headquarters today at the NFB Jernigan Institute. Kenneth Jernigan was the worker, the dreamer, and always the builder. Speaking of building, later Dr. Jernigan called me to Baltimore to discuss building a recording studio. We planned the rooms and the settings just as they exist today. Once they were built, I came again to Baltimore to equip the studio and help find someone to run it. Everyone was familiar with Dr. Jernigan's dislike of flying. Many have heard a description of the eventful flight that Dr. Jernigan, Iowa Commission librarian Mrs. Florence Granis, and I made to Boise, Idaho in the early 1970s, particularly Dr. Jernigan's embellished version of that trip. In truth, we grew in rough weather across the mountains. Mrs. Grandis became ill and refused to return to Des Moines in that small plane that I was flying. After the conference in Boise, Dr. Jernigan and I flew together back to Des Moines. The weather was not quite so rough, but there are always winds above those mountains. Why Dr. Jernigan felt more confidence in me in that small plane than in a commercial pilot flying a large plane is hard for me to understand, and many simply cannot believe it. Nevertheless, the two of us shared some exciting flights together and thoroughly enjoyed them. But fewer knew of two other flights we made in single-engine planes I flew. Before the Idaho trip, Dr. Jernigan, Mrs. Grandis, and I flew into Chicago for a meeting. After landing, my back gave out. By the time their meeting was over, I was not fit to fly. So we quickly went to Midway Airport to get a commercial flight. It was Dr. Jernigan's administrations that got me safely back to Des Moines. I recovered the plane a few days later. Dr. Jernigan kept sufficient faith in my piloting ability to make one later trip to Tennessee. This was uneventful, but on the way I was able to acquaint him with the operation of the airplane, the radios, and of the air system. I remain convinced that if something had happened to me on that flight, with the help of another plane to talk him down, he could have landed the airplane safely, if not prettily. For the last 3 years of his life, I was privileged to serve as personal assistant to Dr. Jernigan at national conventions. I was with him most of the time, attending sessions, traveling between meetings, and helping wherever needed. I also helped supply the Jernigan suite, did necessary errands, and on occasion brought dignitaries to the convention. It's impossible to describe the wide-ranging discussions we had in our walks between meetings and after the day's work was done. By the time we reached Dallas in 1998, Dr. Jernigan had fought lung cancer for nearly a year and was tired of the illness and the treatments. But he carried on in convention sessions for nearly at the top of his form. Doing so took a great deal out of him. On the Saturday after convention, as I was leaving, he took my hand and said, "Mr. McKeever, if I don't make it to next year, find someone else to work for and tip one for me." I assured him that at the time I would tip several for him, and I did. I feel distinctly blessed to have known Kenneth Jernigan. That's of thousands, tens of thousands will miss him because of the attitudes he changed. Thousands more will miss him because of the opportunities he made available. I will miss him because he was my friend. Sao Paulo and Around the World by Lawrence G. Campbell. As the word of Dr. Jernigan's death spread throughout the world, my telephone rang off the hook, and my email basket was full, all asking the same question: what can we do to express our feelings about this great leader who so influenced thinking not only here in the U.S., but in some of the remotest regions of the world where equality for blind people is, in many cases, still a dream. Many fond memories of my nearly 20 years of association with Dr. Jernigan and the NFB run through my mind. Let me share with you one of the fondest. In 1997, ICEVI convened its 10th World Conference in Sao Paulo, Brazil. As chairperson of the program committee, one of my most important tasks was to identify a keynote speaker who would deliver a thought-provoking address that would set the tone of the meeting, whose theme concerned establishing partnerships among parents, consumers, and educators. Dr. Jernigan immediately came to mind, and he graciously accepted my invitation. Dr. and Mrs. Jernigan arrived in Sao Paulo a couple of days before the conference was to open, and after settling them into their hotel and giving them a very quick orientation to points of interest in the area, which included a local crafts market, I returned to the many last-minute details associated with the organizing such a world conference. The conference was to open with Dr. Jernigan's keynote address at the State Palace on Sunday evening. Late that afternoon, I stopped by the hotel to find that indeed Dr. Jernigan had fully explored the local crafts market and had purchased some onyx cordial glasses of which he was very fond. I think some of you here may have used those glasses, and I wanted to assure you that any and all of us who returned to Brazil after that meeting were under standing orders to scour that craft market to find more of them. After all, the NFB is a large organization, and a dozen onyx cordial glasses don't go very far at an NFB function. That afternoon, Dr. Jernigan inquired as to how we would get to the State Palace. Earlier that same day, Victor Sialis, the parent of a blind child, the chairperson of the host committee, had suggested to meet me that we use his helicopter to travel to the State Palace. Ground traffic in the area is always heavy, and we were concerned it would take a long time to travel from the hotel to the State Palace. Without even checking with Dr. Jernigan, I graciously declined, knowing how he felt about being airborne. When I told Dr. Jernigan that a car would pick us up and that I had declined the use of Victor's helicopter, he paused for a moment and said, "Well, Larry, Mrs. Jernigan has never been in a helicopter before, so why not?" As you can imagine, this took me by surprise. But then again, Dr. Jernigan was always full of surprises. A quick call to the pilot, Sergio, and a few minutes later, Dr. and Mrs. Jernigan and I were at the local helicopter, boarding a 6-passenger Bell helicopter and on our way to the State Palace. While Mrs. Jernigan provided a running commentary, Dr. Jernigan, with his unquenchable curiosity, fired one question after another at the pilot, Sergio, who later confided in me that he was quite certain that with a few more flights, Dr. Jernigan would be asking to take the controls. I think it must have been the first time in his life that Dr. Jernigan had been airborne and thoroughly enjoyed the experience. In fact, after landing, he still wanted to learn more, as much as he could, how helicopters were constructed and how they operated. For a while, I thought the conference might open without our keynote speaker. Upon arrival in the auditorium of the State Palace, Dr. Jernigan asked me to orient him to the room and then to walk him through the route from his seat in the front row to the podium. 2 passes through those paces, and he was ready to do it alone. It will not surprise anyone here to learn that his keynote address was magnificent and extremely well received by the 1,500 delegates and local dignitaries on hand that evening. However, beyond the powerful words of his keynote address, there was something else at work in the auditorium of the State Palace that evening. It is reflected in the following editorial, which appeared several months later in the Asia Appraiser, a regional magazine of ICEVI/Asia. I think it sums up what Dr. Jernigan has represented to so many educators throughout the world. It is printed below. When Dr. Kenneth Jernigan of the National Federation of the Blind of the United States of America walked independently to the dais of the State Palace in Sao Paulo to deliver the keynote address of the 10th World Conference of the International Council for Education of People with Visual Impairment, there was thunderous applause. He was independent, elegant, and reassured the conference that visually impaired persons can come out of the social conditioning that they are inferior. Quote, a delegate in the back row shouted with joy, "That is beautiful, Dr. Jernigan. Why don't others emulate you?" Orientation and mobility are vital aspects of the independent living of any visually impaired person. The independent movement of Dr. Jernigan made thousands of people assembled at the palace proud. The striking statement, leading by example, made by Dr. Jernigan during his keynote addresses was relevant to what he had demonstrated. His powerful address set the trend for an excellent conference. After delivering the address, no one was needed to bring him back to his seat. He did it by himself. He, through his action, had demonstrated that he leads others by example. He also indicated how parents, teachers, administrators, and other professionals in the field should lead by example in whatever work they do. We can make our visually impaired children outstanding if they are led by example. Let us make them excellent in education, mobility, rehabilitation, and integration. In doing so, let us emulate Dr. Jernigan and his powerful statement, leading by example. Thank you and have a wonderful day.